The governor's recent statement surrounding a recent bill passed in the legislature regarding red flag laws was such a misrepresentation that I felt compelled to do some explaining. First of all, we've had red flag laws in the state of Connecticut for years, since 1999. Effectively, what happens is if any individual feels that any other individual is an imminent risk to themselves or others, they can report that to the police. The police will do an investigation, submit an affidavit to the court, have an a search warrant signed to seize firearms. That person is then entitled to a hearing, and at that hearing, a judge can order those firearms held for up to 1 year. After 1 year, that individual gets their firearms back, provided that nothing has happened during that year that would provoke the officers to apply for another warrant and effectively start the process over again. It's been in place for a long time, and it works quite well. It's also important to know that any firearms and ammunition can be seized as a result of this warrant. And when these warrants are signed, Special Licensing and Firearms Unit is notified, and that renders any eligibility certificate or pistol permit revoked, which means that that individual who is the subject of that warrant and those seizures cannot make any legal purchases of firearms. What the bill that passed in 2021 did was, rather than have a police officer be the initial point of contact, an individual is a family member. So for example, if I were to be suffering some sort of mental illness in possession of firearms, rather than my wife going directly to the police department and making her report and allowing those officers an opportunity to speak with her, what the new law did was create an opportunity where she could go to the court, submit an affidavit to the court. The court would then have the police department do an investigation. There's no requirement that she even cooperate with them. So I don't know how the officers are supposed to get information as to what was said, where the firearms are held, what type of firearms, etc. What we call intel, before we try to go to a home where there is somebody mentally ill and armed. The governor claims that the new law allows for seizure of additional weapons. Well, I guess the new law would allow you to take brass knuckles, maybe a switchblade knife, but as we know in the state of Connecticut, the leading cause of suicide is ligature. The new law does nothing about that. It doesn't seize belts, ropes, or anything else that can be used for ligature suicide. So while it may extend to other weapons, that's pretty broad, and it doesn't exactly get to the heart of the matter. And it creates a new process through which time goes by and access to information for the officers who ultimately have to do this is limited. The governor also says that the new law prevents a person under that warrant from possessing new firearms. That's already the case. In order to buy a gun in the state of Connecticut, you need an eligibility certificate or a pistol permit. Both of them would be revoked upon the signing of that warrant. And when you went to purchase a new firearm, whoever you were purchasing it from is obligated to call Special Licensing of Firearms for an authorization number, at which point they would not get one and would be notified that your permit or eligibility certificate is in revoked status and you wouldn't buy anything. In fact, the new law allows the subject of that order to go every 6 months to the court and request their firearms back, whereas in the past, 1 year had to go by to see if anything had changed. The governor's misrepresenting this. The fact of the matter is, all this bill actually did was created a gap of information for officers. It's going to send them to a home where the individual who is mentally ill and armed, and they have no intelligence as to what's going on in there as they would if they had gotten it straight from the source. They cut that part out. So we're sending our officers into a no-win situation where the likely outcome is they're going to get themselves hurt or killed or end up having to hurt somebody who's mentally ill. It's a no-win situation that the governor would then use to exploit, to disparage these heroes for his own political gain. It's shameful that he's misrepresenting this and continues to disparage a career and profession in this state with the highest standards in our nation, and it's filled with heroes who do a difficult job every day. I really wish he would do better.